Will, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Sean.
All right, I want to talk Biden pardons, maybe a little confirmation. But before I get to that, as a non-lawyer, we just had this conversation with Enrique Tarrio, right? I don't understand how the circumstances of his case went through the legal system. So here's a guy charged with sedition or seditious conspiracy or something like this, who wasn't in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, had a schedule that he shared with law enforcement prior to coming that said, here's what I'm going to be doing when I'm in Washington, which is attend a rally, and then after the rally, go to Virginia to hear some music. And there are no documents linking him to planning or discussing ever going to the Capitol or any follow-on activities. I just don't understand in our system of justice, how does a guy like that end up going to jail?
Yeah, I don't know how he gets charged with a seditious conspiracy count. I think it's bizarre. The idea that the guy was actually trying to conspire to overthrow the United States government is absurd. And it's laughable, actually. But it's sort of, that connects to the broader problem with all these prosecutions, which is that they were brought into. And I don't think any Republican political activist can reasonably expect a jury of their peers in D.C. It's 95% Democrat, full of Democratic, politically motivated people. And I think that as a result, prosecutors were able to just put whatever evidence they wanted in front of these juries, and the juries would, go forward and convict these defendants regardless of what the evidence actually entailed.
One of his suggestions was that there should be an investigation starting with Merrick Garland on down into what their motivations were for bringing these cases in. Were they politically motivated? Was it lawfare? Do you agree that that has to happen at the Department of Justice?
I agree that it has to happen. I think it was sort of obviously lawfare. Like, we know they told us what the motivations were. They were, and it was almost bipartisan after January 6th. Was they were, you heard people like Lindsey Graham being like, throw all these people in jail forever. That was, the motivation of these prosecutors was to go after January 6th defendants and to get as much jail time for as many of them as they possibly could, regardless of, and not really care about prior precedents in terms of how similar protests were treated previously. And so as a result, you got these wildly disproportionate sentences, and that really did require correction on the president.
So as a non-lawyer, I kind of always have this view about our legal system and our justice system that might be a bit naive, admittedly, that I believe, you get the phone call after you get arrested, the lawyer, I watch maybe too much TV on this stuff. But I start hearing these cases about how they were thrown in jail and just left there. You're hearing a lot of stories. They call it diesel something or other, where they're showing how they take these guys to different jails, hold them there for a while, and then move them so that people couldn't, they kind of were inadvertently denying them of access to their lawyers or whatever by moving them from one prison to another, where they would put them in solitary confinement. Is this the norm that we just don't know about? Does this happen more than maybe someone like me thinks? Or is this really an outlier because it was lawfare against political enemies?
It's an outlier, but maybe not as much as we would hope. It's an outlier in the sense that how vindictive, in particular, these prosecutors were towards this whole group of defendants. But it is true that the federal criminal justice system is very, very tough on criminal defendants. And in many ways, a lot of people assume that a lot of these due process protections exist, but they really don't. They don't exist meaningfully. So many of these defendants, there's a reason that 99% of these cases plea out. And what especially you hear that's really interesting from a lot of J6 defendants is they felt like in order to plead guilty and get the benefit of any type of plea deal, they had to accept lies about their conduct and what they did.
And that's what I think is so untold. That, like, a lot of times people will say, like, well, they pled guilty. And in some cases, maybe they are. I don't know what the number is, but I'm just saying, to your point, there's a lot of times where they come and say, we've got the full weight of the federal government behind us. Either plead to this charge or we're going to drain your life.
Right. And not just that, but like most of these guys, a lot like Biggs and Tarrio, they were offered plea deals that were like, well, you're going to take 7 years. And I'm sure that they were like, what? Are you kidding? Who did I hurt? It rang from their perspective. Like they didn't, they were like, protesting and they trespassed. And suddenly that's 20 years in jail. Wait, I'm sorry. Come again. Right. It it doesn't make sense. But, when you start talking about jailing people for 20 years and having a credible threat of doing so, you're effectively able to coerce guilty pleas out of people who may have been totally innocent.
All right, I want to switch gears and talk about the Biden pardons. When he preemptively pardoned his family, what goes through someone like yours mind in terms of what does this do to the process? What does it mean going forward for pardons, et cetera?
I have sort of a contrarian perspective on this, which is one, I expected these pardons to come down. I didn't care how much he insisted or any of his apparatchiks insisted, oh, we're not going to pardon. But Joe's not going to pardon his family. Of course he was going to do that because one, there's criminal activity that they were involved in, very obviously, if you followed what happened with Tony Bobolitsky and all the revelations about their dealings with Chinese affiliated energy companies. And then second, it's just not going to let anybody go after his family. So I'm not surprised that he pardoned them. And second, I sort of think that I've seen enough lawfare, and I think that it will create a new world where the default expectation of presidents is that they'll pardon large swaths of their administration as they're leaving office. And I don't even know that that's a bad thing, honestly. Like I think that given the alternative is a world where we're prosecuting each other into the ground and really ruining the power of the executive branch and really hurting our country. I'm not one for unilateral disarmament, so I believe that because the Biden people did it to us, we should absolutely be looking to do it to them. I think it's important to not just let yourself be exploited in that sense. Mm-hmm. But I do think the best world for our country is one where neither side is using lawfare against the other once they are empowering the other side's out.
Is it your contention that accepting a pardon, whether it's Dr. Fauci or whomever, is an admission of guilt?
That's the legal standard. If you're asking what I personally say, I don't think that's true. I think it's unreasonable to demand that people go through the criminal justice system to avoid admitting guilt in some nebulous sense. So I understand that obviously people will accept pardons, and I don't begrudge them. We just talked about how terrible the federal criminal justice system is, and how the process can be the punishment. So I don't begrudge anybody for saying to themselves, "Yeah, I'll take the pardon, even if I think I will be vindicated in trial." Like I don't want to go through a trial just to get vindicated. That's
right. I know. Yeah, it's a lot of time and money. Were you surprised that Joe Biden didn't pardon himself?
No, because I think there's a question about whether that power even exists. The power on the self-pardon. Trump didn't do it. I'm not surprised Biden didn't do it. I also think Biden probably thought to himself it would be unnecessary at his age. I just don't see even in a world where Republicans got particularly antagonistic, I just don't see them prosecuting a guy who's 83 and senile. So I don't think it would have been necessary.
I think one of the things that shocked me was they talk a lot about President Trump's pardons and compare him to the family, but what's also missing are the criminals, the violent criminals who Biden also pardoned or commuted their sentences.
Yeah, those pardons were appalling, and we saw them in two respects. First, we saw him commute the sentences of everybody on federal death row to life in prison. There's a reason those people are on federal death row. There was a judge, Alex Kaczynski, who said that when he came into being a federal judge, and being a little skeptical of the death penalty. But he said, if you've been these death row cases and you understand why the death penalty exists, that you can hear the cries of the victim screaming out from between the lines of the dry legal text.
The last thing I wanted to ask you is this. So Hunter Biden and the Biden family have been pardoned. Can they still be pursued criminally for certain things? And then secondly, what could Congress could now haul them up and they can't claim the Fifth Amendment? Is that correct?
Right. I don't think there's much that can be done to prosecute them because it's a massive pardon over a period of 10 years of activity of any crimes against the United States. So I don't think there's any reasonable way to overcome that in terms of actually criminally prosecuting them. But I think that that's what you described is in fact the silver lining. They don't have any reasonable claim to the Fifth Amendment. And really, I think we should actually find out what exactly they were up to. And the only thing that they don't have protection for, they don't have protection for future crimes, so they're not allowed to perjure themselves. So they should be expected to be summoned to the stand and testify about their conduct.
So Jim Jordan calls them to testify in front of his committee in Congress. Is there any weasel way that they could get out of a subpoena?
I think they would try and say that, well, we still have some state criminal liability, possibly. I don't think that's true. I think that'd be a very interesting question to litigate. I think that that would be their claim, and then there'd have to be some sort of litigation to resolve whether or not that's a reasonable Fifth Amendment claim. Like, even if you've been pardoned for all federal crimes you may have committed, somehow there might be some state law crimes that you have. I don't think that works, because I think the pardon would subsume even the state law crimes as well, ultimately. And I'm not sure that there are state law crimes there, but all these crimes that they're describing necessarily have federal nexus. So we'll see.
Unbelievable. Will Chamberlain, I appreciate you and everything you guys at the Article 3 Project do. I know you're doing a ton to help the confirmations as well. So thank you guys for all of the efforts you're putting in to get President Trump's people into office.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
You bet. Thank you. All right. Thanks for tuning in. What a show we had today. Remember, sign up for my free newsletter, SeanSpicer.com. You'll get inside insights about everything that's going on in the Trump administration, Tuesdays and Fridays. Great drop yesterday, by the way, about Trump's first week. Go check it out in the media. SeanSpicer.com. Always love a VIP membership. Tomorrow, we've got a great panel. And Friday, we're talking DEI. Wow. You're not going to want to miss those. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.